Ladies and gentlemen, the June 5th, 2012 meeting of the Finance Committee of the City of Santa Barbara will now come to order. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on topics within the purview of this committee but not on today's agenda? Seeing none, I will close public comment and move on to the first item. Mr. Kiefer, I presume.
Mr. Kiefer, it is, yes. I'm the project planner in community development, and the item I bring you today is a proposed amendment to an existing loan. We're amending the terms of an existing loan that we've given to the Housing Authority, and this involves the Bradley Studio project, which is a 53-unit project of affordable rental housing that's in construction right now. It's located at 518 Bath Street, which is right near Haley, and it'll be for a mixed population of homeless and low-income downtown workers. The loan in question is dated June 2008. The amount was $4.8 million, and it was used for site acquisition. And it was Redevelopment Agency housing set-aside money that we used at that time. We were clearly in a land banking situation at that time. We were just giving the Housing Authority the ability to acquire the site. We didn't know exactly what was going to be constructed when or what it would look like. So to help ensure that progress would be made, we had the repayment of that loan structured so that after 3 years, it would become a fully amortized 10-year note. This is simply a precautionary measure. In the event that no progress was made in developing the site, we wanted to get our money back promptly. The loan also included then a provision that would allow the agency, and now the city as successor entity, to amend the repayment terms. And the standard loan terms for developing affordable rental housing that involves tax credits would be a 55-year term, a 3% interest rate, and that it would not be fully amortized, but instead we would have residual receipts payments, which would mean that payments are due to the extent that the project generates positive cash flow. Payments would be deferred until the end of the first full year of full occupancy operation. So that would mean that payments would start like in January 2015. There would be a final balloon payment due at the end of the term, and the principal amount of the loan, the $4.8 million, that would remain the same. Now, these conversion repayment terms were reported to Finance Committee and Council back in April of 2008. This was clearly our intent. So if we look back at that point in time of last July, the Housing Authority had made sufficient progress to warrant amending the terms. They had gotten all of their entitlements for developing the site at that point. They had been awarded additional agency money for construction, another $3.6 million that we gave them in June of 2011. And they had submitted a successful application for tax credits, a very competitive program. Today, the project is well under construction. We're looking at completion sometime before the end of the calendar year, and then full occupancy happening sometime early next year. The city is the successor housing entity to the former redevelopment agency. The city has assumed all the housing assets and functions. And so we're asking Finance Committee to recommend to Council approval of this amendment to the loan terms as we had originally intended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the committee? Mr. White?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's a 55-year, 3% simple interest loan going forward. And then would have two questions. One is, you mentioned a balloon payment, and maybe that's just the earlier version, but number one, where does that 3% simple interest go? And secondly, is there still a balloon payment involved? And I appreciate that 55 years from now.
Councilmember White, yes, we have a 3% interest rate, and that just accrues to the balance of the loan that is then due. And we still have a balloon payment due at the end of that 55-year term on the project.
So 3% accrues to the balance. No, there's no payments made.
Well, they make payments to the extent that there's positive cash flow in this during this 55-year term.
Okay.
So they could be paying down principal and interest during that time, depending on the economics of how the project will generate positive cash flow.
And what, is there anyone here who can talk about that in more detail and count the beans a little more carefully?
Yes. Councilmember White, Rob Pearson, Director of the Housing Authority. The economics of these projects are structured such that if there is cash flow, we will make payments on these loans, and we have to prove out what our operational revenue and expenses are to the city staff on an annual basis. And if they see the positive cash flow in that development, which we keep separate books for, we will make payments pursuant to that. And it usually, we'll take the positive cash flow that we had for the prior year, let's say it was 2013, in December of 2013, we'll take that positive cash flow that we showed in 2013 and break it into 12 monthly payments and pay that forward in 2014, and that will be done on an annual basis. Our ability to generate revenue really depends on the income of the client group that ends up moving into the units, so it's hard to predict year to year. Some of them will go in with Section 8 rental assistance, and they'll have good rental, we'll have good rental income off of that, but some of the people may be living there just on the low-income tax credit rents. For studio apartments, we're talking maybe $400 per unit per month. And we basically have to look at it annually as what the income mix is, tenant-wise, so we know what our revenue mix is, and we have to look at expenses. And some years, in the early years, expenses should be low because we don't have any great repairs on and maintenance costs on a new building, but in out years, we may have higher maintenance costs. So it is information we share with city staff on an annual basis, and all of these kinds of projects that are financed with agency and now city housing successor loans, basically.
And does, is there money set aside for the new roof in 25 years and that kind of stuff?
We
Can
do
you
have
talk about that a little bit?
we do have replacement reserves. With the tax credit program, all of the initial ownership for the first 15 years is a tax credit partnership or a California limited partnership, and it is a private entity that actually owns the buildings for the first year. We're retaining fee title of the land, but we do a leasehold interest to the partnership. That's how these things get tax credits, because I don't want to get overly complicated here, but you have to create these partnerships because it's only a private for-profit entity that wants to take advantage of both the tax credit. They put cash into it, they get a credit off their federal income tax, and the depreciation on the building. They also enjoy that. 15-year mark, the Housing Authority, under its master lease that it has to operate the building with the partnership or operate the property with the partnership, we have a master lease. We also have a first right of refusal in year 15 because that's when the partners want to exit the development. They've taken most of their tax advantages at that point, and we try to collapse the partnership. And in year 15, we may approach the city and say, it's now time to look at this project. Do you want to forgive the debt, or this is what we can afford to pay off? We will warrant to the city that we'll operate it as a housing authority property for basically in perpetuity. So that's a real decision mark. But if that isn't done, we'll just keep the 55-year loan, and whoever's sitting around at 55 years from now will decide, do they want repayment at that time? That would be the city council at that time, or do they want to work with the housing authority, which would then be the owner, to do something else?
And one last, Mr. Chair, so would you speculate that there would be positive cash flow out of this, or would you speculate that, I mean, I can appreciate that the goal is to provide the housing to folks that can really use it, and that would go against the ideal of the goal of cash flow.
Right.
Could, shall I say.
I would speculate if we have a healthy Section 8 program and we have people living there with Section 8 rental assistance, there will be good cash flow. As that pulls back from year to year, depending on who moves in, whether they have a voucher when they move in or not, it'll depend. And also, we are concerned about the whole federal budget that is working its way through the Congress, and if we get sequestration, we could expect some heavy hits on the Section 8 side of our program, and we may have less voucher holders over time. Therefore, we're going to have to operate at a much lower revenue equation, just what the tenants can afford. There'll be no federal subsidies towards the rent. So that's the concern. But we've done pro formas that this project will walk and survive on its own, just with the tax credit rents if everything went away, but there would be no money to service this loan. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Certainly. Ms. Murillo, questions?
Ready to make a motion.
Then please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on your construction going forward. I would move that the Finance Committee recommends the City Council approve the loan amendment related to this project.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.